Okay, imagine this. A country that's not just, rising, but a real economic heavyweight. We're talking the world's fourth largest economy.
Huge, yeah.
You'd expect jobs everywhere, right? A booming market. But what if I told you that in that exact country, millions especially, the young people, are really struggling to find decent work? It's a really fascinating puzzle. Almost bewildering, isn't it?
It is.
So today, that's what we're diving into. This whole phenomenon in India, the one people often call jobless growth. We've looked at the sources you sent, the articles, the data, all of it. And we're going to try and unpack what's really going on.
Connect the dots, basically.
Exactly. Connect those big, shiny economic numbers with what people are actually experiencing day to day. Because that paints a very different, much more complex picture.
That's right. And this isn't just some abstract economic theory we're batting around. This deep dive is, it's absolutely critical.
Why critical specifically?
Because it's about understanding what this means for, over 1 billion people. When an economy grows like that, but doesn't create enough opportunity, that doesn't just affect spreadsheets.
Why?
It shakes futures, it fuels dreams, or sadly, it can stifle them. Looking at this particular challenge, it's vital for figuring out India's path forward. And frankly, for anyone trying to understand global economics and the future of work.
Great. So let's start with that term, jobless growth. It almost sounds like it shouldn't be possible, right? A contradiction.
It does feel like that.
For those of us trying to really get our heads around it, what does it actually mean when the economy is doing well, but jobs just aren't showing up in the same way?
You've hit on the core of it. Jobless growth is exactly that. A situation where you've got high economic expansion, GDP's climbing, but it simply doesn't translate into a proportional increase in jobs.
That disconnect.
A fundamental disconnect, yeah. And specifically in India, we're talking about a serious lag in job creation, particularly in sectors that should traditionally absorb lots of workers, like manufacturing, and just a real scarcity of formal, stable jobs. But what's really interesting looking at the sources is that this isn't actually new for India.
Oh.
This trend, believe it or not, it seems to date back quite a way, maybe even to the 1980s.
The 1980s. Really, that's striking. That suggests this isn't just a recent issue, but something more, structural, deeply embedded.
Exactly. It points to a longer-term structural issue.
But why back then? What happened in the 80s that started pushing India down this path? More capital, less labor.
That's a great question. It really gets to the history. So in the 80s, India started opening up its economy more, right? Moving away from some of the older, more protectionist policies.
Localization, yeah.
Right. And the focus, even then, began shifting towards modernizing industries. And often, that modernization meant investing in capital machinery technology rather than just hiring more people.
Okay. Efficiency gains.
Precisely. The industries that were growing, especially in what they call the organized manufacturing sector, they became more efficient, more competitive by using technology, not necessarily by employing huge numbers of new workers.
So even back then, the growth wasn't automatically creating mass employment.
Exactly. The GDP numbers might have started looking better, but that engine for creating jobs for the masses, it wasn't really firing on all cylinders even 3-4 decades ago.
Understanding that history really helps frame why this pattern is so persistent today.
That context is super important. It shows this is a long-term challenge they've been grappling with. Okay, so let's talk numbers now, because this is where it gets, really interesting and maybe a bit concerning.
Right.
The official unemployment data for India, I think it was around 5.6% as of June. On the surface, that sounds okay, doesn't it? Manageable, maybe, compared globally?
It sounds manageable, yeah, if you just glance at the headline figure.
Oh.
But, and this is the crucial counterpoint from our sources, many economists actually think the real unemployment rate could be almost double that. Double, wow. How?
Well, what's really key here is the criticism of how they actually measure employment. The official definitions India uses, they're quite broad, and they can seriously skew the data. They can mask how big the problem really is.
Skew the data?
Yeah.
How exactly? What's the definition doing that might not reflect reality for people?
Okay, here's a prime example, and it really makes you stop and think. The current definitions can count someone as employed if they work even 1 hour in a week.
1 hour, seriously?
Seriously, just 1 hour. Think about that. Someone working just 1 hour a week is officially in the same category as someone working a full 40-hour week.
That completely changes how you read that 5.6%, doesn't it?
It changes everything. It means a huge number of people might be technically employed, but they're actually severely underemployed, or they're in precarious gig work, barely scraping by.
So not jobless, but definitely not securely employed.
Exactly. They don't have what most of us would think of as a stable, decent job with adequate pay. So that definition, it really hides the scale of the struggle for sufficient income and, dignified work.
1 hour a week. That's a huge point. It makes you realize how many people could be counted as working, but are basically stuck.
So, connecting this back to the bigger picture, what does this tell us about the type of economic growth India is seeing? Why is employment lagging so far behind if the growth itself is impressive? Is it just that not enough jobs, any jobs, are being created?
Well, linking those things, it becomes pretty clear that India's economic growth story has been driven mainly by capital, not labor. It's capital-intensive growth.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
In practice, it means the sectors that are really pushing that growth forward, think services, especially the big IT sector, right? And even some of the advanced export-focused manufacturing needs rely much more on technology, on machinery, on specialized skills.
Than on just hiring lots of people for manual work.
Exactly. They rely less on large-scale manual labor.
So if I'm getting this right, these sectors are definitely generating wealth, they're boosting GDP, which looks good.
Sure. But they just aren't creating the sheer number of jobs needed for a country with such a massive, diverse workforce. Millions entering the job market every year.
You've got it. These dynamic sectors are important, no question. They contribute a lot to GDP, but their growth doesn't automatically translate into the broad, widespread job creation that India needs.
Right.
Millions of young people enter the workforce every year. Many are unskilled or semi-skilled. A new tech giant might create huge revenue, but maybe only employ, say, a few thousand highly skilled engineers.
Compared to
maybe a more traditional factory that might generate less headline revenue but could employ tens of thousands of workers on the factory floor. India's growth engine just isn't structured to absorb its huge pool of human capital in the way, say, China's manufacturing boom did.
That makes sense. It creates a mismatch.
A big structural mismatch, yeah, between the skills people have and the skills the growing sectors demand. And that leaves a large chunk of the population behind.
Which logically leads us to the human impact. If the growth is concentrated in these specialized areas, who is feeling the pinch most? What does this jobless growth actually look like on the ground for families, for individuals? I remember seeing a statistic about urban youth unemployment that seemed particularly high.
That's a critical point, yeah. That's where the paradox really hits home. The human impact is severe, especially for the younger generation, people entering the workforce, often with degrees, with aspirations.
Right. And
we are seeing a really significant urban youth unemployment crisis. Figures like 19% unemployment for young people in cities. That's nearly 1 in 5.
19%, that's huge.
It's huge. And it's not just a number. It means countless young graduates full of potential. They're either stuck in jobs way below their skill level or forced into insecure gig work, or just completely outside the formal economy.
Which must lead to enormous frustration.
Immense frustration, yeah. And delayed life goals, getting married, buying a place. It's a massive waste of human potential, really.
So even with the GDP ticking upwards, these young people just aren't seeing those benefits trickle down into opportunities for them.
Not in the way you'd hope or expect, no.
You mentioned urban youth specifically. Is there a difference we should know about between what's happening in cities versus rural areas?
There is, yeah, and it's an interesting distinction. While urban youth are facing these really stark challenges, some of the sources suggest that rural hiring might actually be picking up a bit in certain areas.
What is that?
Often it's linked to government employment guarantee schemes, or maybe just people returning to agricultural work because other options aren't there.
But that's not necessarily good news, is it?
Well, exactly. It often means a shift back to lower wage, less stable work, not necessarily a booming formal job market. It just highlights, again, this profound disconnect between the headline GDP growth and the availability of meaningful, stable opportunities, especially for young people starting out. And, this loops right back to what we were saying earlier about the official data versus the reality on the ground.
The 1 hour a week issue.
Right. Economists are really quite vocal about this. They argue the official figures mask the true depth of underemployment, what's sometimes called disguised unemployment. That Reuters poll we looked at, it's pretty stark. Over 70% of the experts they asked question how accurate that 5.6% unemployment figure really is.
70%. That's a strong consensus.
It is. And when you have respected voices, people like, say, Pranab Bartan, a veteran development economist, or Duvuri Subrao, who used to head the Reserve Bank of India when they raised these red flags, it really adds weight.
Sure.
They're basically telling us, look, a huge number of people might technically be working, but they're not in jobs that offer stability or a decent income or use their skills, which for many people feels an awful lot like being unemployed anyway.
That's a really powerful point. That so many experts are saying, hold on, the numbers don't tell the full story.
Right.
It makes you rethink what economic success even means if it's not felt by ordinary people. So, okay, this naturally raises the big question. What can be done? What are the experts suggesting to try and turn this around, to bridge this gap between growth and jobs in India?
Well, the recommendations coming from the experts are pretty clear, actually, and they point towards needing a fundamental rethink of the growth strategy itself.
Okay, like what?
A really crucial shift seems to be needed towards manufacturing-led growth. But, and this is key, not just any manufacturing. It needs to be the kind that's specifically designed to absorb the huge numbers of unskilled and semi-skilled workers who are currently struggling.
So more labor-intensive industries.
Exactly. Supporting industries that actually need lots of hands, rather than favoring the highly automated ones, focusing on sectors that can create jobs at a really large scale.
That sounds logical, but what would that shift actually involve? It sounds like a big change. What are the practical challenges?
Oh, it's definitely not an easy pivot. No. It requires big policy changes, probably significant investment in the right kind of infrastructure for manufacturing hubs, maybe even rethinking trade policies. It means looking beyond just attracting, say, high-tech investment or these very capital-heavy projects. For instance, some of our sources take a critical look at things like the PLI schemes, the production-linked incentives.
Right, those are meant to boost manufacturing.
They are, and they have spurred investment in production, definitely. But the critique is that they often end up favoring the bigger, more automated industries. So they're inherently more capital-heavy and don't necessarily generate the broad employment needed for the masses.
Okay, so a shift in manufacturing focus. What else?
Beyond that, huge improvements in education and skill development are just seen as paramount, absolutely essential.
How so?
We're talking about things like really revamping vocational training, making sure school and college curricula actually align with what industries need now, and creating ways for people to keep learning throughout their careers, Equipping the workforce not just for today's jobs, but for tomorrow's too.
Skills development, right. Makes sense.
And importantly, there's a strong push for policies that are genuinely inclusive, that go beyond just big incentive schemes.
Inclusive meaning?
Meaning things like really fostering small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. They're often the biggest job creators in any economy. So cutting red tape for startups, making sure entrepreneurs can actually get access to credit, things like that.
So it's not just about more growth, is it? It sounds like it's about a fundamentally different kind of growth.
That's it.
One that deliberately prioritizes creating jobs and building skills for the wider population, not just assuming the benefits will eventually trickle down.
Precisely. That's the core principle here. Growth has to be genuinely inclusive. It needs to actually benefit all parts of society. Prosperity has to reach everyone, not just show up in the headline GDP numbers.
Right.
It's about making sure economic development is broad-based, that it creates real opportunities for the many, not just for the few at the very top or in those super specialized sectors. It's really a call for policies that weigh equity just as heavily as efficiency.
This deep dive has really driven home that point, hasn't it? That high economic growth, even hitting number 4 globally, it doesn't automatically mean prosperity for everyone or enough jobs for everyone.
No, it certainly doesn't.
The story of India's jobless growth. It's complex, it's got layers, and honestly, it's a pretty stark reminder of the challenges that can hide behind impressive economic statistics. It really matters how those numbers go up, who's benefiting, and whether it translates into genuinely better lives for the majority.
Absolutely. And I think this whole discussion, it really encourages all of us, you included, to think more critically about economic data whenever we see it.
Yeah.
It's so important to look beneath the surface, to maybe question those headline figures sometimes, and always consider the real world impact of economic policies on actual people.
We should be demanding more transparency.
Definitely. Demanding transparent reporting, yes, but also demanding effective policies. Policies that genuinely put broad-based well-being, stable employment, And, dignified work right at the center, not just chasing GDP growth or celebrating success in a few niche sectors.
Exactly. And maybe that's the big thought we want you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive today. For true national success, for any country really, economic prosperity needs to be visible on the streets, tangible in people's everyday lives.
Not just reflected on corporate balance sheets or in government reports.
Right. It's something to mull over, something to keep exploring as you hear about economic news and policy debates going forward.